Okay, time for a new video. Welcome back to my channel, or hello if you're new. This is yet another Eurovision 2025 related video here on my channel, and today I'm doing a comparison, 2024 versus 2025. Which year's entries do I prefer the most? The crop that we had in Malmö last May, or this year's batch for Basel, Switzerland? A few other people have already done this online. I've made videos like this before in the past, and now it's time to do it again. As always, you're very welcome to let me know your thoughts on anything I discuss in today's video by leaving a comment down below, and as always there are links in the description to my other social media pages. Check them out if you so wish. So let's go through the list of participants, and I'll talk a little bit about their entries last year and their entries for this year, and make a note in my notebook of which one I'm preferring the most, 2024 or 2025. We'll begin with Albania, and I do want to rattle through this at a pretty good pace. This is Titan by Besa versus Žrn by Škodra Elektronike. This is going to be a win for 2025 quite comfortably. Besa, a fine singer, tried to represent San Marino not so long ago, but she had a very lackluster song last year. They had the revamp, which sucked a lot of the power out of it. I thought the performance was quite bland, quite uninteresting, visually not that strong either. It was all in all a bit of a disappointment. This year's Albanian entry is a bit cooler, more intriguing, it sounds a little bit more mysterious, and I'm far more invested with it for the full 3 minutes in comparison to last year's Albanian entry. Some people think Albania could win this year. I certainly don't, but you never know, my opinions might change moving forwards. Nevertheless, for me personally, it is a win for 2025 for Albania. Next up is Armenia. This is Žako by Ladaniva, which was a very light-hearted, get up and have a dance sort of song. Vibrant, they were having a blast on stage, the guy with the trumpet pretending to play it. Very catchy, little bit repetitive, but it did get Armenia's best result for many years. Versus Survivor by Pag, which in my opinion is quite a macho-sounding song. Very sort of gruff and aggressive and in your face and quite angry in terms of its delivery. I know that we're getting a revamp, so maybe things will be toned down a little bit, I don't know, but it's going to be a win for last year for Armenia for me personally. Next up is Australia. 1 Mil Cali 1 Blood by Electric Fields. This was pretty good, quite colourful. The two guys, the other guy came on stage. It wasn't a didgeridoo, but he was playing something like that, and yeah, this was pretty solid. It was flying under the radar a little bit, didn't qualify, which was a shame. If anything, it was a tiny bit underrated last year, in all honesty. The music video, the lyric video we had was very cringy. A lot of people said that, and I have to say I agree with them. But yeah, the song as a whole, not too bad at all. This year's entry, Milkshake Man by Gojo, quite suggestive. It feels quite old school, it sounds somehow. I don't really know how else to describe it. I'm not really loving it, but I'm not really hating it either. And I think if anybody has a real problem with this song, it could be more to do with the lyrical content more than the sound, perhaps. I don't really know. It's going to be a narrow win for this year for Australia for me personally. Moving on to Austria, this is We Will Rave by Kalin, which was being raved about a year ago. People were loving this, saying it's a big contender to do really, really well. The live performance was okay. I was expecting it to be a lot more visually appealing than it was. It was on last in the running order in the final, of course, last year. The votes did not pour in whatsoever, by the juries or the public. What happened here? You have to say it was one of the flops of last year, if not the biggest flop of last year's lineup, because to have that much love and then end up with very little, I don't know, did attention just shift elsewhere? I don't really know what happened there at all. Anyway, this year's Austrian entry is arguably the one to beat. Vocally, very impressive. He's part of the Vienna State Opera, if I remember correctly, so he's, it's perhaps no surprise he's got a really smashing voice. I think he's going to nail it live. It's very dramatic, very powerful, builds up to something very much more in the mould of popera. Might be a bit alienating, this sound, to some neutral viewers and listeners, but it's definitely a strong contender. And for me, Austria goes in the 2025 column. I'm already rambling big time, but bear with me as we move on to Azerbaijan. This is Uzun Leopard by Fari featuring Ilkin Dovlatov. Yeah, I wasn't really loving this at any stage. From the first time I heard it to hearing it at Eurovision, I just wasn't really massively on board with this one. Vocally okay, quite nice instrumentation, but that was really about it. There was nothing for me to grip onto, if you see what I mean, and make me really invested in this track. This year's entry feels a bit more modern, a bit more contemporary. Again, we've got some slight traditional instrumentation going on in the background, and I can't help but feel that if this was an entry for a different country, people would be talking about it more. I don't know. I can't see Azerbaijan doing really well this year again, but I think it's a stronger effort than last year, so it's a tick in the 2025 column for me personally for Azerbaijan. Belgium. Last year was when the party's before the party's over by Musty. Studio version was great. Live wasn't quite working. Vocally, maybe a little bit shoddy in places. But I really loved it. First time I heard it, didn't mind the live performance. I know a lot of people didn't enjoy it whatsoever. And again, similar to We Will Rave for Austria last year, one of the favourites to win, or certainly one of the favourites to do incredibly well, and then it just absolutely faded into the background for some reason. And I really don't know why. I know some of the pre-party performances, I think it was, people were getting a little bit nervous about Belgium's chances. And then obviously he didn't qualify at all, which was really quite surprising. But there we are. What's done is done. This year we have Red Sebastian with Strobe Lights, which is this really pulsating, clubby, anthemic sort of track. Vocally quite impressive. Need to give it another chance. But right now, and I think this will stay the case, it's a win for last year for Belgium for me personally. Moving on to Croatia. Holy smokes, it's an easy choice. It's last year. Rim Tim tagged in by Baby Lasagna, my personal winner last year, my favourite Croatian entry ever. This is a country that is very, very rarely a personal qualifier for me. So last year, to come along with a backup artist, Baby Lasagna, with this song, absolutely extraordinary. People were fully on board with this. Most people were fully on board with this. It was colourful, it was rowdy, it was catchy. The crowd were loving every second of this. It was a job well done. Second place and the winner of the public vote last year. This time around, Poison Cake by Marko Bošnjak. Oh my goodness me, what a downgrade. What a downgrade. He's not bad. The song... oh dear, he deserves better. His entry in Dora a few years ago was superior in almost every way to what we have this time around. I do not fancy a bite of that poison cake, I can tell you that much, and I would be surprised if Croatia do well this year. It's a very moody, almost angsty teenager sort of song, and I'm just not really into it at all, so it's going to be a win for last year for Croatia. Moving on to Cyprus. This might be fairly close for some people. Last year we had Liar by Cilia Kapsis, this really young performer coming out and doing a really solid job. I think she actually impressed a lot of people by how well she performed this last year. Every time she just nailed it. Vocally not too bad. She had the guys with her on stage. It wasn't doing anything incredible or new. There was a bit of choreography. She opened the first semi-final, did she not? Not too bad at all. This year's entry, not too different from what Belgium are bringing to the table, in all honesty. It's Theo Evan with Shush. I don't mind it. And Cyprus usually do all right for themselves at Eurovision. So I wouldn't be surprised if this finishes upper mid-table in the final this year. However, it is going to be a win, for me personally, last year, Cyprus, compared to this year, Cyprus. Moving on to Czechia. This is Pedestal by Aiko, and that was a sort of rock chick type number, very much rock in style. The shoddy Czech national final we had, none of the performances were great, and from what we had to what we ended up having in Malmö was such a glow up, it was unreal. It was a really, really good live performance, I thought. Flames all around the stage, choreography. She did a really great job, and although she didn't qualify, it definitely wasn't a disgrace by any stretch of the imagination. This time around, it's Adonis with Kiss Kiss Goodbye, which feels more in it to win it somehow. He's a good vocalist. I do think the dance break, I'm really not massively on board with that at all. It feels so out of place. But the song is a bit better in my opinion, and more likely to do well. So it's a win for this year for Czechia, in my opinion. Moving on to Estonia, two very expressive standout entries here. We had last year's entry, Vis minus and pulub, nendes narkotikomides de teama kulmidagi, versus Espresso Macchiato by Tommy Cash. It's a win for last year. Wasn't too sure about it at first, but then I was very much on board with this Estonian track. Clearly the juries weren't going to go big for it, and they didn't. The public didn't go massive for it either. There was clearly some sort of story being played out on stage. It was a little bit comical, but it was fine. This year's entry feels more forced in terms of its comedy, if you see what I mean. Tommy Cash is quite a controversial figure. This is going to do very, very well with the public, I'm sure of it. But a lot of people also seem to not like this at all. So there are really conflicting opinions on Espresso Macchiato. For me, though, it is going to be a win for last year for Estonia. This year's entry, by them, it's okay, but I'm not really on board with it at all, I'll be honest with you. Next up we have Finland. This is Windows 95 man, no rules. He didn't do incredibly well in Malmö, did make the final though. To me, first time I heard it, to the Eurovision performance, I thought it was cringy. I didn't want to see his bare ass on stage. I thought the vocals weren't brilliant. I thought visually it just wasn't that strong, emerging from this egg. It was all a bit bizarre. And although it was trying to be a bit funny, it just came across as really quite cringeworthy to me. This year's entry feels more mature and powerful and sexy and strong. And Erika is such a great performer. This is, of course, Erika Wickman with Ich Komme. I don't think anything needs to change for Eurovision. She can just go on stage in Basel and do exactly what she did at UMK. Same staging, same look, same everything. And she's probably going to do very well. I've seen a few comments from individuals recently saying that actually Finland might not do as well as we first thought. Nobody's really hyping this one up anymore. But I'm sure at the pre-parties, when the rehearsals begin in Basel 2 months from now, people will be fully on board with this one once again. So it's going to be a win for 2025 for Finland. Next up is France. Mon Amour by Slimane. Really a song just to show off his vocal power. White outfit, pretty much all one camera shot. That moment when he took a step back from the microphone, belting this tune out. Classy ballads, never really go out of style. He did a solid job, and the result was very impressive. Barbara Pravi, exactly the same. The public were on board with that one to some extent, no doubt about it. Slimane, the public were on board with him to some extent. This year it's another ballad-type entry. Louane, big star in France. There she was at the Stade de France very recently. My reaction is up on my channel. The song is called Maman. I wasn't too sure about it at first. The studio version, that was the selling point for me. Really, really good stuff. And I absolutely believe France are in it to win it. I really, really do. We should not be surprised if France do challenge for the win this year. Not one bit. It's going to be a win for 2025 for me personally. Moving on to Georgia. Easily last year. That was Nutsa Buzaladze with Firefighter. Georgia playing it a bit safe after a few quirky entries in the recent past. Gold outfit, flames. Pretty bog standard pop song. The result was no surprise, but it got them back into the final after years away. This time around it's Freedom by Mariam Shengalia, and the nicest thing I can say about this is that she's got a pretty good voice. Everything else might well send you into a deep coma. It is not a particularly strong song. It feels a bit disjointed. God only knows what they were thinking. Last year is where Georgia goes for me. Next up is Germany. This is Isaac, Always on the Run. Relatively unfancied, and then he got Germany's best result for ages. Vocally sound every single time. That barrel that was up in flames, and then we had other flames around the stage as well. The juries really liked this. He wasn't disgraced by the public either. He was on early in the running order too. You have to say, a really, really impressive result for Germany last year, no doubt about it. This time around, Ballad by Aberentina, more contemporary, could be a big radio hit all over Europe. Don't see any reason why that couldn't happen. I thought the national final performance was a bit shoddy though. Vocally, I think she was unwell, so maybe that goes some way to explaining why I thought the vocals maybe weren't bang on the money. But everything else I thought wasn't brilliant either. So I think there needs to be a lot of improvements for Eurovision. I really do. And I hope we get them, and I believe we will get them, because it's a really solid effort. It's a win for 2025 for Germany for me. Moving on to Greece. This is Marina Sati with Zari. pretty much all one camera shot. Very different for Greece, very different from anything we had last year. Some very interesting visuals going on behind her. Loads of people were really, really on board with this, and I wanted to be one of those people, but I liked her more than the song, I've got to be honest. This time around, it's a ballad. Klavdia, Asteromata, Girl in Glasses, fabulous, looks great, clearly very touching, quite emotional somehow. I think this is flying under the radar a bit. I think Greece could do very, very well with this. I don't expect much from the staging, but I think the juries will like it, and I think the public will dish out a good amount of points as well. So it's a win for Greece for this year for me. Moving on to Iceland. This is Hera Björk with Scared of Heights. Ultra dated, ultra bland, just wasn't competitive enough one bit. And this year it's Roa by Vibe, which is a little bit junior Eurovision in style. It's the two brothers. They're having a boogie on stage. It's sort of electro pop. I'm on board with this one. It's going to be a win for 2025 for Iceland for me personally. Bear with me, we're getting through it. Ireland. This is Doomsday Blue by Bambi Thug. Came upon the rails like you wouldn't believe. Wasn't my favourite from the national final, but the live performance was just sensational. Owning it for 3 minutes. It absolutely stood out a mile. The juries didn't mind it. The public were on board with it. Ireland's best result for absolutely ages. This time around, it's a massive step back. It feels a bit more silly. Doesn't really feel too serious at all. Emmy, who is not from Ireland, with Like a Party, could well open the second semi-final. It's a bit of a bop, but I don't really know if the support is going to be there in May. I really don't know. Last year's entry just felt far, far stronger, I guess. Far more interesting and far more engaging somehow. So I'm going to go for last year for Ireland. Next up is Israel. Well, last year we had Hurricane by Eden Golan, and this year we have Yuval Raphael with New Day Will Rise. I've heard both songs, of course. This year's entry is slightly better for me personally. They're both ballads. They're both not doing anything incredible. Both fine vocalists, but the songs, you know, I feel like I've heard it all before. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm sure the result will be inflated. Next up is Italy. This is going to be a win for last year. The beautiful Angelina Mango with Lanoia. A little bit Latin in terms of its sound. The Sanremo performance was pretty good. At Eurovision, it fell a bit flat. They went for a sort of throne made of thorns and roses, if I remember correctly. She looked great and sounded pretty good, and she had dancers with her. But the stage felt very empty and not nearly as colourful as I thought it should have been in terms of the lighting. This time around it's Volevo essere un duro by Lucio Corsi, which is really growing for me personally. What a classy... It feels like it's from the 1970s almost, transplanted into the modern day. Really, really nice. I'm liking the slight hazy vibe it's giving off. But it is going to be a win for last year for Italy for me personally. Moving on to Latvia. Dons with Hollow. Great singer, blue outfit, which I didn't really love. That big circle behind him. Surprise qualifier. He was better than the song in all honesty. But it was a good result, no doubt about it. And this year, Burman Laimi by Tautu Metas, all-female group, very folksy, very springy, very sweet in terms of its sound, but not too saccharine. This is a really close one. Narrowly, it's going to be this year for Latvia for me. But I actually think they might really struggle in the second semi-final. I don't know. Moving on to Lithuania. Last year we had Luktelk by Sylvester Belt, which really did grow on me. I saw the national final performance weeks after he actually won the thing, and I thought, yeah, job well done. And I thought on stage in Malmö, it was really good. Pretty good stuff. And then this year we have Catharsis with Tavoakis, which is a lot more moody, miserable, depressing, any other word like that you can think of. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I like this year's Lithuanian entry, but it's going to be a win for last year for me personally. Moving on to Luxembourg. This is Tally with Fighter, who exceeded expectations by finishing upper mid-table last year. The juries were really quite on board with this one, which was quite surprising because it wasn't really doing anything new. Versus La Poupe Monte le Son by Laura Thorne. Like her, the song is very sweet, very cutesy, very twee. We are getting the revamp soon, and I'm excited for it because I'm interested to see how much different it is from the original version. It's going to be a win for this year for me personally. Moving on to Malta. This is Sera Bonici with Loop. Last in the second semi-final last year. Disgraceful, solid pop song. Choreo, that bit where she's blindfolded. All really quite impressive, but people weren't on board with it because people are rarely on board with Malta. Will that be different this year? Will that be different this year with Serving by Mirjana Conte? I don't know. We've had the revamp. It hasn't really changed my opinion on the song one bit. I don't mind it. But I don't know. I'm not really on board with it a great deal whatsoever. I know I'm repeating myself here, but anyway, it is going to be a win for last year for me personally with regards to Malta. Moving on to Montenegro. They weren't involved last year, so it's an easy win for this year. Nina Zizic, Dobrodošli, an okay ballad, but I think it might struggle. Moving on to the Netherlands. This was Europapa by Joost Klein, who of course was disqualified, but this was a big sort of dance-type number. And that sort of frantic finale, the bizarre visuals, the outfit with the big blue sleeves, the person dressed as a bird on stage. I mean, he would have done really, really well had he been involved in the final, no doubt about it. It was a viral hit, it was a smash, and most people really, really love this. This time around, something very different. C'est ma vie by Claude. Feels more mature, feels more serious somehow. It's more low-key, no doubt about it. Perhaps it's not quite having as much sparkle as it needs to really do well this year. But in terms of what the juries might go big for, this has to be up there. It's going to be a win for last year, though, for the Netherlands for me. Moving on to Norway. Gorta with Ulveham. This dark, almost gothic-sounding rock metal type number with the flashing lights and the great lead vocalist, last place in the final. Yeah, of course, what a disgrace. And then this year, bang, bang, average with Lighter by Kyle Alessandro. It's fine, but I'm really surprised people are loving this as much as they are. I just feel as though I feel like I've heard it all before. And that's okay sometimes, but I'm thinking to myself, I can't imagine a song like Lighter finishing top 10 in a Eurovision final. Then again, Grab the Moment by Joust in 2017 finished top 10 in a Eurovision final. Yes, that was a different sounding song, but I think that caught people by surprise at the time. Anyway, it's going to be last year for me for Norway. Moving on to Poland, this is The Tower by Luna. Very messy staging, vocally a little bit shaky as well. They went for a chess theme on stage versus Justyna Steczkowska back after 30 years with Gaia. Maybe a little bit too cluttered, maybe really overdoing it, you could say, a little bit. I'm hoping the performance in Basel is a bit tighter somehow. It's bound to do well. It's a narrow win for this year for me for Poland. Moving on to Portugal, this is Grito by Iolanda. Fantastic ballad. Public didn't care much for it, there's a surprise. Versus Deslocado by Napa. All-male group, singing about where they're from. Very touching. Bit of a surprise winner maybe in FDC not so long ago. It's coming up on the rails. More and more people are vibing with this one now. But last year's Portuguese effort is stronger for me. This all-white look that they went for, vocally sublime. Grito wins. Moving on to San Marino. This is Megara with 1111 versus Tutta l'Italia by Gabri Ponte. It's a win for last year. It wasn't the best live performance. They went for a sort of purple cartoon theme with the visuals and indeed their outfits. This big rock number, fire, flashing lights, the whole shebang. It was good, but it was clearly lacking support and was unlikely to progress, which is exactly what happened. It did not go through. This year's entry is more likely to do the business. Gabri Ponte is a pretty famous star, which might work in his favour. Italy can also vote for him, so that might be a few points already in the bag. This was the Sanremo theme song, pretty much, and it's catchy and likeable, easy to go along with, but it's going to be a win for last year for San Marino. As for Serbia, last year we had Teodora with Ramonda, which I think a lot of people have just sort of forgotten about a little bit. The performance was fine, the song was fine, quite tender, quite sweet, but ultimately the result was no surprise. And this year we have Prince with Mila. Now he might qualify, we've had the revamp, he's a pretty good vocalist, but the song, you have to say, it's not quite hitting the mark in comparison to some more recent Serbian entries. It's a narrow win for last year for me, for Serbia. As for Slovenia, this was Raven with Veronica. She was in that rather scantily clad attire. She had dancers with her. Vocally very strong. The song, though, not quite hitting the mark for a lot of people, maybe. And this year we have Clemen with How Much Time Do We Have Left? A very personal ballad, which might do better than we're expecting. However, right now, if you ask me, this is coming last by some distance in semi-final 1. It's going to be a win for last year for me, for Slovenia. The last few countries now. Spain, this is Thorra by Nebulosa. Fun, guys with their backsides out, very camp. Not the best vocally, but the performance was good, and I remember watching it back quite a few times after the contest. It wasn't my favourite from Benidorm Fest, but I can understand why it won, and I really didn't mind it in the end. This year, Melody, Essa Diva, we've had the revamp. I liked the original, I like the revamp. It's one of my favourites this year. A lot of people think it's going to struggle. It probably will, but it's a really solid pop song by a pretty famous star. It's going to be a win for this year for Spain, for me personally. Moving on to Sweden, Marcus and Martinez with Unforgettable. The two guys opening the final. This sort of slight electro-pop number, visually pretty cool, not too different from what they did at Melfest. Yeah, not too bad at all. To me, it felt as though it took quite a while to get going, though. This year we have Kai with Barbara Bastu, a big turning point for Melfest and Sweden in Eurovision in general. Obviously, links to Finland, very catchy. It's the cha-cha-cha, rim-tim, taggy-dim of the year. Barbara Bastu, the three guys having a blast. The crowd will absolutely love it. Talking about relaxing and pushing aside your worries in a sauna. It's a win for this year for Sweden for me. Dear me. Switzerland. Last year they won Nemo, The Code. This year we have Voyage by Zoe May. Last year's entry was blending all of these different styles. Nemo performed it so well, it was a worthy winner. This time around, it's a pretty straightforward ballad, but it's really quite moving. And we now know Switzerland will be 19th in the grand final. That was decided earlier today as I talk to you now. But nevertheless, it's a win for last year for Switzerland. Ukraine, Bird of Prey by Zifferblatt. That's this year's Ukrainian entry. It's growing on me ever so slightly. It's bound to do well. It's a real breath of fresh air. Nothing else is quite like it. Ukraine are kings at this, sending things unlike anything else by any other country. Last year we had Teresa and Maria by Aliona and Jerry Hale. Really liked it, didn't mind the live performance, very powerful, and just really loved the quite simplistic melody, in all honesty. It's a win for last year for Ukraine. And then finally the UK. This is Ollie Alexander with Dizzy, an okay pop song, super camp, performing in some sort of rotating bathroom looking scene, guys with their tops off. It was all a bit odd, and I think people were put off by it. Ollie's not bad, he deserved a better song. And then this year we have Remember Monday with What the Hell Just Happened. Likeable girls, nice harmonies, fine music video, but by Jove is that going to struggle as well. Nevertheless, I prefer this year's entry. Now hopefully I haven't messed up here. Let's count this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 and 18. Dear me, well that's 36. There should be 37. I think that's because Moldova, isn't it? Moldova, I really should include them. If I include Moldova, then it's a win by 1 point for last year. That's a hell of a lot closer than I expected when I first started filming this video. But nevertheless, there you go. It's pretty much a tie, which is very interesting indeed, because I still think that last year's lineup was stronger. But there we go. Maybe I'm talking a load of rubbish. Let me know which year comes out on top for you. This video's been very, very messy and my voice is starting to ache. But nevertheless, I'll be back with more Eurovision-related content fairly soon. I think my next video will be a running orders predictions for the semi-finals, so watch this space. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and bye for now.